Just first of all, I'd like to run through some of the domestic arrangements, please. Can you please ensure that your microphones are muted when you're not speaking? If you fail to do that, you'll find that I'll probably, or someone may mute you. Please don't take offence. It's just to prevent any background noise that may come through. It's obviously important that we don't interrupt each other. If we use the text box, if you wish to speak, and just say you'd like to speak, and then I'll bring you in at the relevant time, please. Members are also reminded not to use messaging chat functions during the meeting unless it is to report a pecuniary, non-pecuniary interest. And if you wish to make a proposal regarding the applications before us, if you notify me that that's what you wish to do. Members are also reminded that they should not have other lines of communication open, i.e. Skype chats. And if you're contacted by a third party during an application, can you please let us know, because no one should have the ability to contact you during this meeting. If you're attending the meeting to speak and you're interrupting the meeting, you will be asked to leave the meeting. Additionally, you'll be invited to speak when it is your turn. We keep to the same rules as before. 3 minutes for anyone wishing to speak, and it will become clear that there is in front of us on the screen, there will be a timer so that you'll be able to see how much time has gone and how much time is remaining. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live and is being broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will also be recorded, except where they're confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. I'd just like to run through the people that are present on the call with us today, who we can call on at any time to assist. We have Ian Duprays, who's our legal advisor. Welcome, Ian. We have Claire Philpott, our governance officer. Welcome, Claire. John Pateman-G is in the call. He's our area planning manager. Welcome, John. And Jack Wilkinson is the case officer who will be presenting today. Now, we have the applicant. We have maybe the members of the public present. On my list, we have the parish clerk. We have Caroline Walton and Chris Smith, who at various times will have the opportunity to speak during the application before us. Okay, so, and James Caston is with us, who's the ward member, who has the opportunity to speak on the application but not vote. So I'm going to move us on to the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. Can I ask the governance officer to just roll call the members present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, when I call your name, if you could just indicate your presence for me, please. Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Present.
Councillor John Field. Councillor Lavinia Haddingham.
Present.
Councillor Matthew Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Mansell. Present. Councillor John Matheson.
Present.
Councillor Richard Mayer.
Present.
Councillor Dave Muller.
Present.
And Councillor James Keston.
Sorry, present. Hit the wrong button, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move to agenda item number 2, to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Members, do you have any declarations to declare? John, we can't hear you at all. Can you try one more time? No, there is a problem with your line, John. What I think you'll need to do is log out and log in again. You're coming over with a very high-pitched voice, and there's something wrong on the line. Sorry, John, we can't hear any of that at all. If you want to type anything, but I think if you log out and John has left, good. We'll just give him 1 minute just to log on again.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just say that this exact same thing happened in a seminar just the other day, and it was because the member was using a headset, and as soon as he unplugged the headset, he was back to normal again.
Okay, I'm using a headset. I only ever use a headset, so okay, we'll try that and see what happens when John logs on.
It could be that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, John,
Am I back on?
you're back, and we can hear you loud and clear, so that's good, John.
It's all right. It's about the 6th time to log on. I just needed to declare 2 issues, neither of which are pecuniary, really. The first issue is that I'm county councillor for this area, which I feel you should know. That's the Bramford application. The second thing, I have an involvement as a trustee with an application which is mentioned a few occasions at the Bramford end of Sproughton. The one that's mentioned adjacent to the Birstall Road.
Okay, and Ian, you're happy that none of those are pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Field. Yes, I heard all that, and I'm happy to advise that Councillor Field has properly declared those matters. And the first one is is usually declared for the sake of the fullness. But they're both, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing pecuniary there.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Okay, any other members have anything to declare? No? Okay, so we move on. Agenda item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Now, I suspect all members have received an email from the applicant. Any other lobbying on, I think, anyone else wish to register any further lobbying on this application?
John Field again, just
Yes.
that I have been lobbied over some months. You must remember at one time I was ward member for this area.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Rick Mayer received an email from Caroline Walton.
Yeah. I think we all have received that email. So I think for the record, we've all received lobbying on the applications before us. Okay. Thank you very much. Members, agenda item number 4 is declarations of personal site visits. Does anyone have a personal site visit to declare? No. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of May 2020. These are laid out in our papers on page 7 to 10. If I just run through each page, if you have anything, please just do feel free to come in. Page 7, page 8, and page 9. Is everyone happy that I sign those as a true record of the meeting? If you're not happy, please speak. Otherwise, I'll take that as given. Thank you. I'll sign those afterwards. Okay, agenda item number 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petitions scheme. Could I ask, please, the Governance Officer to report on this? Do we have any?
There's none received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda. I will now ask the Area Planning Manager to report on the applications that were to be heard by the committee but have subsequently been withdrawn. Are there any? John? John Pateman-G?
Sorry, Councillor, that something went wrong here. Could you just repeat the question for me?
Under the order of business, it says that I will now ask the Area Planning Manager to report on any applications to be heard by the committee but have been subsequently withdrawn. Now, that may be, I know that happened in the last meeting, but is there anything to this meeting that needs to be reported?
I'm not aware of anything, Chairman, for reporting at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now go straight to agenda item 7, schedule of planning applications. I'll now ask the case officer, Jack Wilkinson, to introduce the application to committee. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring up the PowerPoint, which hopefully you'll be able to see.
Just while that's happening, just to be clear, this is DC 19-01401 and DC 19-01649, land to the south of Fitzgerald Road in Bramford. I think we've just lost Jack altogether, so I'm sure he's logging back on. Here we go.
Sorry, Chair. Not sure what happened there.
Perfect. So if everyone goes to the wide screen, you'll have a bigger picture in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the public. I'm Jack Wilkinson. I'm a principal planner in the DM service for Baber Mid Suffolk. The first and only item for today is land to the south of Fitzgerald Road in Bramford. You'll note that 2 application references. This is a twin tracker application. So in terms of what we're here to determine today, the planning application is an outline application, i.e. the principle of development and access. This is summarised in the proposal as outline plan application with some matters reserved for a residential development of up to 115 dwellings and access, including open space and landscaping. Just to give you an idea of where we are, as depicted by the red marker, we're amongst the Ipswich Fringe, towards the southern extent of Bramford, A14 to the east, Sproughton to the south, Claydon and Little Blakeham to the north. As mentioned, we are situated towards the south of Bramford, and I will zoom in on a better quality image in a minute. The site is outlined as hatched. I think what is also worth mention is the district boundary, as depicted by the black line, which hopefully you can see with my cursor. So we have Parish of Bramford here and neighbouring Sproughton in the district of Baber towards the south. As per the existing local plan, Bramford is defined as a key service centre. The extent of the blue line shows the settlement boundary, and the application site is outlined in red, just to give you that distinction. In terms of the emerging joint local plan, that remains of limited weight, but it is worth mentioning with regards to emerging policy LA 006, which does identify the site for residential housing. This is outlined on page 26 of your papers. You'll see that the red line outline is largely covered within this area. In terms of the defined site outline, i.e. what we would rely upon in terms of the plan and an accurate extent with detail, it is as shown. The applicant also owns the defined blue line area. The land is divided by grade 2 and grade 3 agricultural land. Much of the district is set in this form, and that's worthwhile mentioning in terms of the landscape quality. In terms of how the site looks from the air and indeed from the ground, which I'll take you on to in a moment with some site photos, the built form, as you can see, is predominantly to the north, owing to the backdrop of the village, which is where this site is located. Towards the west, we have the B1113. It's an arterial road that links Bramford to Sproughton and Ipswich Edge, along with a link north towards the A14. It's an arterial route. We have Fitzgerald Road along the north as well, with bus stops leading into the centre of your key service centre of Bramford. Just to remind members, this is an indicative master plan. We are looking at an outline application for up to 115 units with access. So the principle of development with access will be for debate. I think it's prudent to show this image to show how the site could be developed, and certainly taking account of the landscaping, the open space and play areas, the flood attenuation, the connectivity amongst the site and indeed to the wider area, the public right of way which runs through the centre, and the access points. Whilst this drawing may seem a little chaotic, I'm choosing to include it because it does show how the site would sit within the context of the locality, given the contour. The land rises out of shot west, but it is predominantly flat, as you can see from the contour lines. So in terms of the landscaping, this is an element that officers have considered in depth, and you'll note that whilst this is indicative, we have sought to capture this through condition. There's no objection from the landscape consultant, subject to a 10-year buffer of advanced planting. Towards the frontage, the site is predominantly open, and much of the site as existing is arable field. Your local flood authority also raised no objection. And again, this is an indicative permeability drawing, but I've chosen to include it as, you know, if the site is approved, there is every chance that this could come forward given the developable areas and the site topography. These areas, the pink, the green, and indeed the orange, show your site's sealed surfaces, if you like. However, these surface areas are permeable and they are compliant in flood and water terms. So back to the master plan, and we'll now look at access. Access is a dual access onto Fitzgerald Road, as you can see, linking north. From the access points, the visibility splays along this 30-mile-an-hour stretch are adequately secured. In a 30-mile-an-hour zone, the minimum requirements along the X and Y, i.e. left and right, is 43 metres in both directions. The applicant is able to demonstrate 70 metres in both directions, so this is way above and beyond what your local highways authority would require. It's now prudent to look at connectivity, and members will relate to the site along the southern edge, Fitzgerald Road, and the closeness of A, built form, but also services, facilities and amenities. And I've chosen to highlight the bus stops as well, as set out in yellow. This is a sustainable location. Your officers have looked at the routine bus routes, and the site is well served. Sustainable location, adjacent and adjoining a key service centre amongst the Ipswich fringe with good transport options. It's imperative that sustainable development provides the option for future owner-occupiers to use public transport and indeed sustainable transport modes. This would be facilitated well given the bus stops nearby and indeed the closeness of the high street along with the shops that are along this stretch. So I'm now going to take you through some site photos. Members may wish to follow the map bottom left corner or the site plan, master plan, and the arrow. The arrow is a guide as to where the photo was taken from and in what direction. Starting with this first photo of the western fringe, you've got the pedestrian footpath along the west, the dwellings of Fitzgerald Road along the north. The site is as shown. The view east. As you can see, the site is relatively flat, looking across the centre towards Bramford and the most southerly dwellings on Fitzgerald Road. This is the public right-of-way, as you can see, well worn, that leads off into the top right-hand corner of the site. These are the dwellings along Fitzgerald Road, taken from pretty much the centre of the site. These are of two-storey form. This is a view in the opposite direction. You'll see the public right-of-way on the left-hand side of the photo, and you can see how far the land creeps up towards the west outside of the site. Public footpath opposite the site along Fitzgerald Road. And I've chosen to show you this image from what I could find is the highest point towards the west, looking down onto the site. You'll see the site outlined in red, but I will just go back. You'll see the church tower building here, and basically the southern extremity of Bramford. The site isn't greatly wooded or indeed subject to planting within the central sort of belly of the site. The edges aren't hugely landscaped either, but there are several dense tree and hedgerows along the western edge. And certainly the enhancement measures that are set out through planning condition are endorsed by officers. So I'm going to leave you with some facts and figures, and we can revert back to this should you so need. And it is in the detail. We've got a 9.08 hectare site for up to 115 units, 35% secured for affordable housing, which are NDSS compliant, nationally described space standard. So they are of good quality. And that would be set out within the section 106. The density is appropriate as well, and given the landscaping, we have looked to capture that. We've got highways compliant access and egress, and also flood and water compliant management. There's also some contributions that collectively, along with other sites that of Suffolk, i.e. that it falls slightly into the neighbouring Baber district, that also have an impact for this site and vice versa. In terms of the highways contribution, those elements are captured. So if this site comes forward along with others, there would be highways contributions that would go to mitigate through raised bus stops, highways improvements of junctions, public transport, etc. The early years contribution would be provided off-site, and that's a BCIS indicated build out. Your recommendation from officers is for approval, subject to planning conditions in section 106. It is a case of harms against the benefits, and inevitably there would be landscape harm arising from newly built form on an agricultural field. There is negligible heritage harm also, which your officers have balanced in the overall conclusion. But the benefits are abundant: new homes, which are affordable, open space, the early years building, highways improvements and landscaping. And whilst the district is able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, this isn't a ceiling height. The clear thrust from government is to deliver homes, and I'll leave that for now. I'll hand you back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, in the conversation box, John Field, you have a question. John.
Yes, just an initial one concerning the buses that you're talking about. We're talking about this being a sustainable location, and you mentioned bus services. I was just surprised the numbers 111, 111A and 988. Is there anything special about the 988, 989s that those numbers indicate? So the nature of those buses. Secondly, my belief is that the bus service is 4 buses per day. Am I incorrect in that they travel through Sproughton into Ipswich via a somewhat devious route? So for a parish with about 4,500 inhabitants, you have a
John, we just need to keep it. Let's just keep it to quick questions. So it's 4 buses.
The question. Yes, the frequency of the buses, we've claimed it, they're adequate, it's a good service. What is it? And the bus numbers, do 2 of those indicate they're actually school buses?
Thanks. Jack.
Thank you for your question. The references within the report under page 29 to the 4 bus services are taken from the County Council website in terms of what is available. The frequency of those buses I can look into and come back to you on, but I know that the frequency is supported certainly within the Ipswich Fringe. So allow me to get back to you on the precise times and hours of those buses, if I may.
Thank you. I'm really looking for whether it's an adequate service, considering other services have recently been withdrawn.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through it in alphabetical order, because I suspect we've got lots of people who've got questions. So I'm just going to go through it in alphabetical order. So Jack, are you looking that up now? Are you happy to take other questions?
I'm happy to take questions, of course. I will look at the bus timetable.
Yeah, and it might be someone else can have a look at the bus timetable while you're answering the other questions. Okay, so first up is Rachel. Rachel Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few questions to ask.
Well, let's try and keep it to 3, and then we can come back to you.
Okay. In the papers, it refers to some of the consultation documents refer to 175 buildings, whereas the application is 115. So just to double check that. The parish, it's mentioned on page 16 that the parish plan is a material consideration, and I've not come across that before. So confirmation of that, please. And if I'm only allowed 3 at the moment, what's the cycle route for pupils going to Westbourne Academy and Claydon High School? So how will they travel from this site to school? But I have got more questions, Chair, but perhaps you can come back to me the second part.
Let's just do 3 at a time. That makes it easier for Jack to reply. Okay, so can you come back on those 3 points to start with, please?
Yes, thank you. The parish plan mentioned on page 16, you say, is there's a parish plan area, but it doesn't form part of the development plan. So it is a material consideration, but it's of appropriate weight, i.e. limited weight. The cycle route that you are referring to, we'll get back to you on. And forgive me, there was another question, wasn't there, with regards to something else?
Some of the papers, supporting
Yes,
papers,
of course.
refer to 175 dwellings.
Sorry, so initially this application came forward as 175 units. That's been reduced quite considerably. The comments that are contained within have been assessed on 115 units as well. Given that this is a much lesser scheme, the content is still relevant. So procedurally, I'm more than happy with the comments that are set out, how they relate to the proposal that is before you, i.e. for 115 units.
Okay. So another 3, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. On the conditions, it refers to biodiversity enhancements and also to sustainability measures. Can you detail what these are, please? Thank you.
That's on the recommendations on page 44. Fine.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of biodiversity and ecology, there are skylark mitigation measures required as per Place Services Ecology, as a means of ensuring that there would be no net loss, or indeed there would be a net gain in terms of ecology and biodiversity. The detail of those I will just look for now. So they are the skylark mitigation plots in accordance with the habitat regulations that we are bound to adhere to. In terms of the sustainability measures, this would be dealt with mainly at reserve matters, but it would compel the applicants to provide sustainability details at reserve matters that would be above and beyond what we would typically require. This is in essence a standardised condition that we've looked to adopt more recently, given the climate emergency, but also what the NPPF says. So what you would get are units that would be discussed at detail, with a preloaded sustainability emphasis on them in terms of open market units and, of course, affordables.
Thank you.
May I come back, Chair, on that?
Please do.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's just that you say the sustainability measures be dealt with at reserve matters, but because the condition here, I just expect there to be more detail, and will it therefore effectively, I think there's notes on supporting page 176, would it effectively cover what's in that the consultation feedback from Ian Farquharson?
Indeed.
Okay,
indeed. I think, sorry, I will just come back on that. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what measures would be introduced because we're dealing with an outline application, whereby we're only looking at the principle and access. Once the overall design and layout orientation of buildings is known and plots, and indeed numbers, we can then look to introduce the more acute details. I think the most important part is we're teeing the applicant up to provide sustainability and energy measures that are sufficient and in line with core policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just going alphabetically, next up is Councillor Field. John, over to you for questions.
Thank you. Just a couple more points then. The passenger transport requirement, you mentioned a sum of £170,000. I can't find any indication of what that's for. So I wonder if you could make that a bit more clear. I can see the raised bus stops and that sort of thing, but they're quite small. The second question really is about highways mitigations. The route from here into Ipswich is down the B1067, which you can see in the middle of the plan before you. And yet all these mitigations appear to be in Sprawton, perhaps more associated with other developments, except of course for the cycle link on Lorraine Way, which should take children along to Suffolk 1. So could you expand on those two things a bit, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's, whilst I'm on this drawing or image, I think that is an option to go along the B1067 off into what would be Bramford Rose, heading off into Ipswich outside of the district. And you've also got the arterial route, which is your B1113 south. So you have got options, whether it be, you know, cycling or walking, or indeed by public bus. That brings me on to the public transport element that you've mentioned. Suffolk County Council Highways have looked at the collective area in terms of, forgive me, I'm going to go through the drawings. I've looked at the collective area in terms of what could be built out potentially, and we do have to plan for the future in terms of what the site brings. This is our application site outlined as hatched in pink, outlined in orange. The green dots are approvals towards the north. Outside of the district, as delineated by the black line in the parish of Broughton in the district of Baber, the red dot is a refusal, and the orange dot is a pending application. This junction, amongst others, forms part of the consideration because it is within the locality and it is within the jurisdiction of the county council as to where money is spent in terms of the public highway. Obviously, the 170,000 goes to the bus improvements that would serve this development, and it would go into a pooled pot. There is nothing before members to suggest that the site would not benefit, but given there is potential, this site could go to appeal, this site could be approved. All of a sudden, you've got two more developments that affect this site and vice versa that the county council are duty bound to consider. So we have to look at that. I think the most important part is that these monetary contributions to offset these concerns are included. It would be a bigger concern if they weren't. The county council do have that gift, and this is a consistent approach.
May I come in at this point, Chairman?
Yeah.
Jack, do you have a wider aerial photograph of anything wider than what you've got on screen right now available?
I may have, yes, at the start.
Because I think it's just worth pointing out that in respect of this development and the burden that we are obviously seeking to mitigate in respect of this development, you need to look a bit wider in terms of where travel will occur as a response to any development on this site. Now, Bramford has its main linkage into Ipswich, but it doesn't link onto the A14. The junction to link onto the A14 is just outside of Broughton. The next junction to get to the A14 is in Claydon. So, of course, that makes the B113 the main route, if you like, in terms of cars coming off this site to get to those relevant junctions. If we were to go further south beyond the village of Broughton, you'd find that we'd link up to what was known as Wolsey Grange, Pinewood and Tesco's, and that is also the Copdock interchange at that point. So this route is obviously part of Suffolk County Council's strategic understanding of how the outside of Ipswich is going to work in the future, and obviously any development within this corridor is needing to contribute towards that to mitigate its own burden, but also be part of a grander plan in terms of understanding the transport requirements of this side of Ipswich. Just to mention, while we're on this plan, are you able to point out Westbourne High School? Because I believe that was a ask earlier in respect of the route, and of course the route to get there from Bramford would be along the B1067, which is a fairly standard road. It does have a footpath along it all the way, and then of course you have to go into the suburbia of Ipswich in order to reach the Westbourne High School. Claydon Claydon High School, which is in the middle of Claydon, that's a little bit more difficult to get to. You can go along the Bramford Road, the B011 but it is a 60-mile-an-hour road in places and doesn't have a footpath in places. You can get along what's called Paper Mill Lane, which is that one there, thank you. That again doesn't have any footpath along it for the majority of it. It is slower, but there are blind bends along that road. So I would perhaps suggest that cycling is not. There are public footpaths and you can walk to Claydon from Bramford, although it is a distance. But cycling is probably would be more for much older children and adults if that was to be participated into as an activity. I would suggest that the school bus that does run through Bramford daily, well, it did up until obviously lockdown. Those arrangements are obviously being reviewed at the moment, but being all very well that will be restored, will run through Bramford and leads to Claydon for any children as an available option. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. John, did you have any further questions?
Can I just come in? I can only see slide 22, so the whole of that conversation does not relate to the slide that I can see on my screen. Am I seeing something different from everybody else?
No, slide 4 is up, but these slides are in...
I can only see 22, so something's gone wrong. What am I doing wrong?
Well, you're not. We have one slide in front of us.
Oh, well, I can only see number 22.
Has your screen frozen? Councillor?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I'm completely confused. I'm completely out of it because I'm referring to things I couldn't see on the map.
Okay, Sarah, you've said that. So what is in front of you at the moment?
Slide 22, which says bus stops.
Okay, so Jack, can you take the screen down and then go up again? Take it down and then put it up again, please.
And I'll pop the screen back up again now.
Okay, Sarah, what are you seeing now?
Loading. I now see slide 4, but unfortunately I was at a loss, so I'm afraid I may have missed the plot.
No problem. So, John, can you just go to the relevant page and just give a summary again? I think it's better that we're clear.
Okay.
More than one John, but we'll accept.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, John Pateman G.
Okay, so I was saying that, I tend to talk and not think about what I'm talking about. Right, let me start again. So I was saying that if we look at the overall picture of Bramford in its setting to Ipswich, and I did get us to a plan that was indicating where the junctions were. So ultimately, any development in Bramford is likely to need access to the A14. Bramford itself doesn't have access to the A14, so you have to either go through the village of Sporton to get to the interchange, which is being indicated at the moment by Jack, or you need to go north and go to the interchange at Claydon. The alternative option is to go all the way south through the village of Sporton and into essentially Ipswich, where you have Pinewood and Tesco's and the Copdock interchange. There's also new development there that is regarded as Wolsey Grange within the Baber district. In terms of so we were talking about the strategic contributions that would be looking at that entire corridor between Claydon and the Wolsey Grange and Copdock interchange, because it's all interconnected due to the 113. Going into Ipswich itself, along the B1067, that is the way you'd go to get to Westbourne High School, which is just indicated there. You then go into the network of the suburbia of Ipswich to get to the school. There is a good footpath, there is a good road in order to go along there, which I'm not aware of any issue, particularly in that respect. To get to Claydon is more problematic because you have to go either along the 113, which is a road that doesn't have a footway all the way around. Just about there is actually, there's no footpath there, and I do know that from personal experience because I used to bike along there in order to get to Needham Market. We do then get to Claydon, but the other route is Paper Mill Lane. Again, that doesn't have any footway, so a cyclist would be on the road for the majority of it, and both of those roads are perhaps not as suitable as going into Ipswich, where they are slower traffic speeds and wider, straighter roads. However, there is a bus service that goes through Bramford, and it is a regular bus service for kids, and that is available and put on by Suffolk County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that all right, Sarah?
Thank you. Is there anything I need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
No, if it happens, just shout and we'll just log on.
Well, I did try and put a couple of messages up,
Yeah,
but that's why I ended up shouting in the end. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so John, are you finished with your questions? Next we go on to...
I was not entirely finished. I was just pointing out that the questions, and I was trying to ask questions, were what was the 170,000 for passenger transport for? I can see the small sums, but what was the bulk of it for?
Yeah.
I could come to what I'd like it to be for, but I don't know what it's actually for. The second question, really, in a way, John Payman-G has sort of illustrated, which is that the highways mitigation I would expect to help pupils and people, people who don't drive, perhaps people who don't wish to drive, get in and out of Ipswich, as well as access the A14 in both directions. And I have to say I haven't lived here for 30 years without knowing where those junctions are. It just looking at the highway mitigation, there's a cycle link on Lorraine Way, which is from Bramford to Sproughton, and that heads to Suffolk 1, good. But the majority of the other cash is things like zebra crossing at the Wild Man, great for the pub, I'm sure, and reduced curb radii in somewhere, I know not where, and
John.
Beacon roundabout. So the issue is, what are these things that will...
Yeah, so you want to know what the 170,000 is being spent on?
Particularly.
Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Essentially, this goes into a pooled pot that is within the jurisdiction of the County Council, and I wholly understand your concerns of where that goes, but I must stress that this is largely dependent also on whether it is needed, given the other developments within the locality that I outlined earlier. So highways mitigation, such as your curbs, etc., may be required. This would fall under the realms of a Section 278 agreement. The crucial factor here is that we as a district council are securing it, and the county council would be delivering it through Section 278. That's all that I can give you at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Okay, we now move on to Councillor Haddingham. Lavinia, do you have any questions?
I don't, thanks, not at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Mansell, you're next. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a number of questions. So if I do three now, and then I'll think if I've still got any more.
Yeah, do three.
The first one is, we were told at the beginning of the presentation that this is a twin tracker application, and I just wondered if that had any significance or any implications. Presumably it means that they are both identical and we have to determine both of them. I'm not quite sure if it has any other implications. That's my first question. The second question is about the early years provision, because I think the paperwork is a little bit confusing. On page 38, is it 38? No, I've probably lost a piece of paper. One of our bits of paper says that there is a early years building on the site, but on page 39 we have some information about early years and infrastructure provision, and it says that it will be subject to early years education contribution in section 17.1. In section 18.1 it says additional preschool places at existing establishments. So is there or is there not a early years building on this site? And my other question is about it's possibly to do with the fact that there was a previous application, but some of our papers have an indicative master plan which shows housing in the far south of the plot, and then we have a slide which shows that as the open space. So can we be quite clear that we're looking at the indicative layout which has the open space at the bottom of it?
Yeah, I think Jack's explained that, but Jack, can you just cover those 3 points off?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The twin tracker is the form that the applicant has chosen to submit through. So we have 2 applications that are to be determined today. Both are, you are correct, identical, with the only difference being the references. The site is identical. The early years element is an element that would be secured off-site. There isn't a provision on-site. The funding for the provision built to BCIS standard would be secured through Section 106, having consulted the Development Contributions Manager at the County Council. In terms of, and also apologies for the confusion within the papers, that is most definitely off-site based upon the school places needed and the costs associated. The final question was to do with the master plan. This is the indicative master plan, as you can see, which is on slide 14, Councillor Mansell. Can you see that, Councillor Mansell?
Can you see that, Sarah?
Yeah, I've got slide 14. It's just that we have some other slides in our paperwork which had a different indicative master plan.
I think
page 231.
Thank you. Page 231.
Yes, page 231.
Yeah, that's irrelevant. This is the proposed master plan, and the elements that are considered are set out as per. We're relying upon slide 14 for that purpose. Trust that's clear, Chair.
Thank you. Can I come back on another couple of queries?
Please do.
We were told that the density was 12.7 or something like that. Now, does that include that large area of open space? I'm assuming not. Presumably that 12.7 dwellings per hectare is over the whole site, including that open space. And I'm sorry, I'm not very good at road names in the Ipswich Fringe. Can somebody just point out to me on a map where Lorraine Way is?
Thank you for your question. So I've actually included, are you on slide 32, Councillor Mansell?
I am, thank you very much.
Perfect. So the third notch down is a quantum mix of detached and detached and terraced houses. You've got a gross and net dwellings per hectare, both of which are compliant with policy. So whether you include it or not include the open space as a whole or just a developable area, both are within compliance. And you also had a question about Lorraine Way, which I'll just get to.
Lorraine Way is the B1313.
Indeed. So it's this road here. It extends all the way up.
So where is the cycleway going all the way from this site to where?
It goes all the way to Suffolk 1, which is the college on the edge of Pinewood in Ipswich in the district of Baber. So you have, in essence, Lorraine Way, the B1113. You can see Lorraine Way marker there to the north. I'm going to go to another image, sorry. That's better. So we have Claydon, Bramford Road, and it leads off from here all the way down through past the site, through Sproughton, and you may know the Crossroads, Wildman Pub, and off into the edge of Ipswich. So that links off the cycle route.
Thank you.
Sorry, Matthew, may I just correct that slightly?
Yeah.
Unless anybody knows better, the £60,000 cycle path goes from the top of Fitzgerald Road, the point more or less where that red marker is, and it goes down to the Wild Man in Sproughton. There's already a footpath along there, and it modifies that.
Fine, thank you.
It would be good to go the rest, and it's possible to go the rest, but I don't believe that actually is covered with that sum of money.
Thank you for that, John. So it's just a short stretch along that B1313 from Bramford to Sproughton that this development is going to provide.
Well,
it links up this part of the journey
to something that's existing network.
And what? Okay. There's an existing cycleway from Sproughton to Suffolk 1.
There's the option to do that. I can't give you that answer because we're not in charge of the county council function. Ultimately, the section 278 agreement that county council choose to implement would provide detail on that.
Okay, so any other questions at all?
I think that's it for now.
Thank you.
Something else may come to mind later, you never know.
Yeah. Councillor Matheson, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you, yes. I must say the presentation was excellent. The one thing that wasn't there that I was looking for subsequently surfaced as slide 41. And I think it'd be helpful if we could get that one back again. And I did really want to understand the relationship with the other nearby developments, applications, etc. that John Pateman G was speaking about. But I wanted to understand them particularly in the context of the paragraph 6.6, 6.7 and 6.8. These discuss the four travel mitigation amounts of money, conditions, etc. And
so, John, have you got a question on those points?
Yeah, absolutely. What is worrying me that is not clear is this development that we're looking at the moment delivers some amounts of money towards contributions towards these schemes, the four schemes that are listed at, say, paragraph 6.7, and the 6.8 discusses the sequence in which they might be delivered depending on the other developments. So I'd really like to understand a bit more about that, because I was expecting that the 6.6 seems to be looking for the list of those developments, which John Pateman G has now gone through, hopefully all of the relevant ones. So if they don't all go forward, and certainly at the moment we're saying we've got one refusal and one.
Okay, well let's pick up this point. Yeah. Let's pick up that point. Okay, Jack.
Thank you, Chair. I think the most important part is to plan well, effectively. If all sites were delivered, this site could come through at appeal. This site is yet to be determined, which I trust you can see. Slide 41, perfect.
Yes.
If all were I didn't before, so thank you for putting it back up again and running through it again.
Have you got it, Councillor Matheson? Good. The most important part is that if all schemes are to be delivered, and that is a possibility, then there needs to be that link up of, the connectivity made. The most important part is that these elements are captured. And yes, this particular site that we are here to determine, hatched in pink, would contribute to the sites at the north and to the south, and vice versa. If schemes are approved outside of the district in Baber, then the pooled sum of money from both sites and offshot towards the Copdock interchange where Tesco is, those schemes would contribute to this scheme. So all have a collective input. It's a cumulative effect. The most important part is that it's included rather than not included.
Thank you.
John,
thank you.
Follow-up questions.
I'm not clear yet that my reading of paragraph 6.8, which starts off saying the improvements require all the developments to come forward, and as I say, that we can see that's quite possibly not going to happen, is that it seems as if the cycle link is the last one that would come forward. In other words, if any of the applications that are currently been refused, etc., don't happen, then the cycle link is the first thing that gets dropped, and I would be concerned at that.
I appreciate that completely.
Yeah, John, please, no views at this point. It's just questions.
No, I get that, but you do see. I want to understand exactly.
Yeah,
so
John, it's
saying it's a sequence with the cycling at the end.
At this point, there's no view, just questions. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I just want to hopefully be a bit clearer. The bullets listed at para 6.7 are not sequential. They are not ordered. They are just listed. The important part is that these 4 elements, these 4 bullet points, would be considered by the local highways authority. So there is no guarantee that the 4th bullet, i.e. new cycle link between Broughton and Bramford, would be locked off first. There's no guarantee of that at all. We would be in the hands and the jurisdiction of the County Council. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions, John?
Yeah, I think the other thing which Councillor Eburn has touched upon already is that, you know, can we be assured that the entirety of Ian Farquharson's proposed condition will be contained within the sustainability measures condition? There is the full wording.
Yeah, of course. I think we've adopted a more of a standardised sustainability measures condition.
Good.
Which I trust you're aware of.
Yes.
And this is, you know, common with certainly major applications that we've adopted in the past few months. So yes, we can include that.
Good. Thank you. That's all for now.
Okay. Thank you, John. Next, over to Councillor Richard Mayer. Rick, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Just, well, a couple of questions. The page 121, it says there are no surplus places in the local primary school or secondary schools, and that very significant SIL funds would be required to enhance them. Are those funds going to be available, and will the schools be enhanced or expanded to cope with the increased demands if this site gets approved?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Mayer. I think as an absolute minimum, the duty of care, and certainly there is a duty within the county council function, is that school places must be provided, whether that's at the primary school, whether that's at nearby secondary schools, or whether there's a bus provision. If there's no space, this has been thrashed out at appeal on quite a few occasions. And it's a very difficult topic to stand up, if you like. The most important part is that the county council have to provide school places, and certainly the SIL funding and the SIL injection would go a long way to providing that. So SIL is included, and the bid of where is it, £545,000 circa, that would go some way to providing that. I hope that's useful.
So those SIL funds would be available. And then expanding that into the healthcare, is there any SIL provision to expand the health services in the area, which I note are 671 below what they should be already?
May I come in on that point? Ultimately, the SIL, community infrastructure levy, is a pot, and that pot will be, distributed in accordance with the council's infrastructure plan, and that obviously plan gets worked up between the district council and the county council. In terms of the NHS as well, they are can bid for money as they see fit for expansion or improvements to care within the area, just as with schools. And we are working in these days in reverse. The money will be put into the pot, and the money they seek in respect of this development has been outlined, and I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be provided on the commencement of the building, or the phased commencement of the building, and then that'll be then up to other authorities to seek the appropriate money to go to the appropriate locations. In terms of school provision, we don't have any objection in terms of education to say that the relevant schools, both primary and high school within the area, and because we are close to Ipswich, there is a fair choice, don't have the capacity to expand. Now, as I do live in this direction, I do know that most of these schools do have good capacity and land available to them to expand if necessary. Obviously, being close to Ipswich as well, there are various choices in terms of doctors and care and clinics and so forth also available, and it would be for the NHS Trust to distribute monies accordingly through any seal bid they might make. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Chair. That's all I had.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Dave Muller. Dave, have you got any questions?
Not a question specifically, Councillor Hicks, but I can provide some clarification to the question raised by John Field earlier regarding the public transport. He is correct. There are only 4 buses at the present, but because the hourly bus service linking Stowmarket and Ipswich via Bramford was withdrawn last year. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else got any further questions? No?
Yes, please,
Yes.
Chair.
Yeah, who's this?
Sarah.
Hi, Councillor
Maxwell.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have another question. On our indicative layout, which I believe is slide 12 of our papers, I can't remember if it's the same one on the presentation, which is, I admit, is only an indicative housing mix, but the numbers at the bottom of that slide for the open market dwellings do not tally with the strategic housing needs, which are on page 142 of our report. And I wondered if anything had been said or discussed about the open market housing mix.
If I may come in on this particular point.
Please do, John.
In terms of affordable housing, members will find, obviously, in our recommendation that the application will be subject to a Section 106 agreement, and the affordable housing mix is detailed there in full in terms of both property sizes, bedrooms, and size of property. So we have. That is completely open and transparent in respect of this application. We have not, and I'm double checking, and Jack will correct me if I'm wrong, we have not sought to secure the market housing mix in respect of this application. And I think that's all I can say.
Correct.
Thank you. At least it's clear.
Okay. So we're now going to move on. Thank you, members. And we now move on where we ask the Parish Council representative to speak. And we have Diana Stroh who's going to speak. Diana, you have 3 minutes. Up on the screen shortly will come a timer, which will indicate for you the 3 minutes. We'll just give it 1 second. Just checking, are you there, Diana?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, so you can see in front of you there's a 3-minute timer, which just gives you an indication as you speak, the timer will start. So over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start by saying Bramford Parish Council has been consistent in its concerns over these proposals, but has also tried to be fair and objective in its responses, and I hope that comes across to the committee. It's also taken into consideration the huge swell of public opinion in what appears to be a significant objection to this proposal and supports the parish in that. I just wish to briefly reiterate what concerns the Parish Council has previously raised, i.e. is it a sustainable development with regard to the National Planning Policy Framework framework, there is significant development currently underway or approved for approximately 300 dwellings at the other end of the village. It's been mentioned already, Mid Suffolk's 5-year land supply. Is that relevant? And whether these proposals satisfy certain strategic objectives, i.e. protecting the environment, supporting strong and healthy communities and infrastructure. We've spoken about the buses being reduced, the public right-of-way through the centre of the development. And is there any further information from Highways as to the potential effects of the decision to close Bramford Lane recently made? Suffice to say, the Parish Council's response did refer to a proposal for 13 houses on the site made back in 2002. And it's believed that some of these reasons for refusal are still relevant today. The development then was described as a visual intrusion to the detriment of the rural character. This is the only remaining view of some of Bramford's most historic buildings. The church, which is grade 1 listed. It was described as a car-centric development with issues regarding the access onto and from Fitzgerald Road due to the sharp bend one end and parking along the road, probably now exacerbated by a significantly increased number of cars on the road over 20 years. And then there's the desire by Suffolk County Council at the time to retain the character and future use of public rights of way, a sentiment still echoed today with the County Council's desire to improve the access to green spaces. It's hoped the committee will take into account these issues when considering these proposals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, members, do we have any questions for the Parish Council?
I have one.
Yes.
It's Councillor Mansell again.
Okay, Councillor Mansell.
I would just like to ask the Parish Council representative if there has been any communication, consultation, whatever the word is, between the developer and the Parish Council on this application.
No, there hasn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a brief question?
Yes, Councillor Phil.
From the parish, basically, the sustainable transport into Ipswich. Is the current situation satisfactory to the residents of the village?
No, it hasn't been for a while. A meeting last year when the 89 bus was withdrawn generated 50 residents attending the meeting, and there's still been no resolution as to what's going to replace it at this time.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we're now going to move on. Thank you very much. Next, we move on to an objector, Caroline Walton. Caroline, again, you have 3 minutes to address the committee. And again, you'll have the timer will just be reset for you. There we go. Okay, and over to you. Are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we'll start now. Thank you.
You'll see from your reports our residents feel strongly about this development and on our greenfield site that lies outside the village boundary. 597 objections have been sent to you across the 2 applications by our community expressing their concerns. The village of Bramford have had the planning approval of 512 dwellings since 2015, which is a 48% increase in housing, with 2 large developments to the north of the village of 325 dwellings which are still under construction. This development is for a further 115 homes to the south. Sheila 2019 states Bramford is to provide 295 dwellings. The local planning authority is able to demonstrate that it has an adequate 5-year housing land supply. It is not identified in the parish plan and is located outside of a defined settlement boundary. Therefore, this development is beyond policy requirement and not currently needed. The site must also be considered in context of a multitude of sites along the Gipping Valley corridor, contributing to massive cumulative growth and an almost continuous ribbon of development along the B113. These sites show a clear demonstration of creeping coalescence of ribbon development, which the MPPF specifically warns against. Place Services Landscape Report states the views will be adversely impacted upon as a result of the development. The special landscape area and views of the Gipping Valley Riverwalk would be greatly affected, along with a footpath that cuts across this site with views of the great Policy CS5 states it will protect and conserve landscape qualities. This development does not. It will be an inevitable change to the character of the existing agricultural land, causing landscape harm. The wider heritage views will be affected, and Suffolk Preservation Society states St Mary's Church and Street Farm Cottage listed buildings are still at risk and recommend a further reduction of dwellings in line with Sheila and JLP. The site had planning application for 13 dwellings refused in 2002, as mentioned by the clerk, and it was refused due to the detriment of the rural character and appearance of the area. It again shows that this development of 115 dwellings is not appropriate on this site, as 13 were refused. This field performs many functions for wildlife, recreation, flood risk and food production. It is of huge value to the community and should not be used for housing development when other sites are available. Bramford has the brownfield site of Fisons on Paper Mill Lane. This site is sustainable and ready for development. NPPF states development of available brownfield sites must be completed as a priority before greenfield is considered. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions at all from members?
Yeah, I have, John.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you mentioned right in the middle of your comments the NPPF. I wonder what paragraph that was and whether officers can help us with that a little more as to which point is being made in the NPPF. Thank you.
I'm terribly sorry, I don't have the paragraph available. Obviously, I could look that up, but I'm afraid I don't.
Okay, John or Jack, can you help us with that?
Which question? The question of coalescence or the question of brownfield versus greenfield?
I think it was the coalescence point, actually.
Give me a moment, I'll have to find it. Bear with me.
Just look at myself.
Thanks. Any sign?
I've just had a look, John, and I'm not sure whether you've found anything, but coalescence isn't really discussed within the NPPF. Certainly there's no word to that effect. I know that there's case law that's come out from South Norfolk with regards to settlement coalescence, and it comes down to it's a straight shootout on landscape grounds, and whether the coalescence would be too close to the body of another settlement or indeed another village. I think the coalescence aspect is an important part that we certainly have considered because it's a poignant matter. I think the separation distance between Bramford and Sproughton is adequate, more than adequate, given the stretch along Lorraine Way. John, have you got anything to add upon that?
I'm still looking, and I will continue to look. I can't find anything either. Obviously, I'm looking also at the section within the NPPF about greenbelt, but of course that applies to greenbelt, and obviously people often take that out of context. I do recall, in terms of Mid-Suffolk, one of the debates about coalescence was where we had Stowmarket and Stow Upland, but that literally was half a field between the village boundary and Stowmarket Cedars Park development. In this case, there is obviously a greater distance. But bear with, I think we need to move on, and if I can find something appropriate, members, I can certainly bring that to members' attention.
Okay. Happy to move on, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, John. Okay, next up, we have an opportunity for a supporter to speak, but we have no supporter that's come forward. I'm just checking there's no supporter who's come in. No, okay. Next, we now ask the applicant, Chris Smith, to speak. Again, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, and we'll just be resetting the timer. Are you there, Chris?
Morning, Chairman. Yes.
Morning. Okay, over to you and your 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, my name's Chris Smith. I'm Development Planner for Hopkins Homes. As has been outlined by your officers, the site lies in a wholly sustainable location on the edge of the settlement of Bramford, within walking distance of a good range of local services and facilities, and forms a draft local plan allocation within the emerging joint local plan. Through positive working with your officers since the application submissions in the spring of last year, the requirements of all statutory consultees are now able to be fully addressed, thus enabling your officers to be confident that the proposals will provide a high quality, sustainable new development within an attractive landscape setting, forming a positive visual enhancement to this southern entrance to the village. As you've heard, the proposals will deliver up to 115 new dwellings, of which up to 40 will be affordable homes in full accordance with existing policy. In association, there'll be over 4 hectares of new public open space, alongside all the requested financial contributions towards other essential infrastructure via the SIL and Section 106 procedures. In summary, therefore, we trust that you can concur with your officer's recommendation and that you're able to support the proposals. Thank you, Chairman, and as always, I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open up to members. I guess the first one is from me, around engagement with the Parish Council. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, we had a public consultation event at which the Parish Council were present coming up for 2 years ago now, when the concept of the development was put forward, and obviously members of the Parish Council and indeed local residents had the opportunity to have their say. We had a very good turnout at that event, and obviously there are a variety of opinions offered, and some more positive than others. And on that basis, we then took the application forward to where we are now. So,
right, but is it a company policy not to engage with parish councils, or
no? Certainly, we are happy to engage with.
So why didn't you on this one? Could you just explain?
I think it was clear that the parish council weren't in favour of development in principle, and on that basis, it's difficult then to have a positive dialogue. But as I say, we've not just gone to the parish council, we've held an event locally where
no, you've made that point clear, but what I'm trying to get to is why you chose to ignore, not get involved with the parish council, because we always find at this committee that if parish councils engage with the applicant, you get a much better decision making process. But obviously, so you made a decision you did not want to engage with the parish council because they weren't supportive. That's the answer you've given.
No, we've always been open to dialogue with the parish council, but they've made their position clear, so that there's not been the opportunity really to engage further in that respect. But
okay.
Our door is always open, and we're happy to talk to anyone.
Yeah, okay, and they would, I'm sure, say exactly the same. Their doors are always open because they meet monthly. But okay, so you chose not to engage with the parish council. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, John.
Just about the indicative plans. I always find these slightly uncomfortable. One understands the principle, perhaps, but we have a range of indicative plans here, which we're told the one on the screen is the right one. We have in the past often asked developers whether they were prepared to see a condition that says essentially that development should be broadly in line with or essentially in line with the indicative plan, just to make sure that we haven't based our opinions on a load of make-believe.
Yeah, and in terms of yes, certainly the indicative plan that's on the screen before you now has evolved over time through the process of the application and consultation with your officers, and as your officers said, with your council's landscape consultants. Our intention would be to bring forward a reserve matters detailed application that broadly accords with that layout. And obviously in putting this layout in the public domain, people will rightly expect that any reserve matters fairly closely aligns with what's shown on the plan here.
So you'd agree with the condition?
Yes, I don't see a problem with a condition worded that, you know, any reserve matters submission should broadly align with the details shown on this indicative layout, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're not here to try and come forward with something different. You know, we're trying to establish at this point in time a layout that we feel that we could build to an acceptable and indeed a high quality appearance and form and scale, and fit with the character of the locality in the area, and indeed in accord with the main things on here. And you'll note on here the lines that are shown in terms of views to the church, views through to the special landscape area in the river, alignment of the public footpath, and yes, we'd like to be able to come forward with a layout that you know does accord with that. So I've not got a problem with a condition to that effect, no.
I've just got one other question. Can I just ask, obviously under the recommendation that's in our papers on page 44 and 45, it talks about obviously the affordable housing at 35%. Can you confirm that you won't be coming back with a further application to change that will actually stay as is in the future?
Yes, Chairman. I don't see any reason why we should need to do that. You know, we've had discussions with the offices. It's an outline up to 115 dwellings. We feel that 115 dwellings can be accommodated on here, and therefore that's why we've had this indicative layout to try and show how that could be achieved. And certainly within that layout, the requested amount and layout of affordable housing should be deliverable. So yeah. No, I don't see that there should be any need to. So if
there's an economic down, because I'm just thinking back to Framlingham when you there was an economic downturn and you went back and took out the affordables. So your view is that the affordables here and the shared ownership will stay in place even if there is an economic downturn.
Yes, Chairman. I mean, just for other members' reference, the Framlingham site was a brownfield site that had vast additional costs over and above what would normally be anticipated. This is, as you've heard, a greenfield, previously undeveloped site, so there should be no reason for us to come back on that point.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to the ward member, Councillor James Caston. James, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you will see, this application has a huge amount of public objections and comments. This is actually 9 times more objections than the Willowbrook and Cemex sites, which were 185 and 115 dwellings. It's more than those put together for this one site of 115 houses. This goes to show that the residents of Bramford are open-minded to development, but this particular one is completely unacceptable to them. Whenever I've spoken to residents in Bramford, the Fitzgerald development has been a major issue. Throughout the village, this application was considered seriously damaging by most residents. This is also my position on it. I feel the development is completely unacceptable for the position, which I'll talk about a bit further. Whilst against Fitzgerald Road, there is a site for development at the Fisons on Paper Mill Lane, the Fisons area. This is one of the last arable fields visible and usable and accessible to the residents. So I'm going to talk now a bit about the quality of land. In the planning application, there was a land grade assessment. The field is downgraded to a grade 2 because of its intolerance to drought. This is because it's free draining. In the expected crop and land use survey, it is designated as 76, suitable for cereals, sugar beet and other arable crops, some fruit and horticultural crops. The soil tends to dry out. But in the pictures, which I think are quite useful, you can see how green those fields are. It lays in the perfect position for irrigation of high value crops, which would bring it as good as any grade 1 land, which of course we know Mid Suffolk does not have any grade 1 land in its whole area. What better position for use of water that is drained away from Mendlesham in the future, in a future that will be shaped by the need for water, and this attenuated water can be used for something useful. In the wintertime, the sugar beet was lifted off this field and it was cultivated within days. I don't think any farmers would disagree that this was a terrible year, and probably the hardest in a generation for lifting sugar beet and working land. It was so incredibly wet. It is now a really respectable spring barley field, which is in itself incredible, considering we didn't have any rain during the whole of April and May in Bramford. This field is delivering food into the market in a year where most fields have really struggled. The only real issue for this field is, I can imagine, is the grazing of the wildfowl going into the river, because it's backs onto the floodplain, as you know. The area of the Stour and Orwell estuaries special protection is adjacent to the site, and it's an incredibly special wildlife corridor. Taking more farmland away from this will not deliver the biodiversity net gain. You're taking the type of land that is an asset to wildfowl and wildlife associated with the river and replacing it with gardens and that harbour a very different type of biodiversity, a biodiversity that is not needed by a river. If you add domestic cats and dogs barking into the mix, which I'm a cat and dog owner myself, I haven't got a problem with it, but you will find that these creatures have a much harder time surviving. This is the second to last arable field that lies between the B1313 or Lorraine Way and the B1067, which is the Paper Mill Lane and Bramford Road, either side of the village. It's the only arable field you can now see as you drive home from Ipswich from your driver's side. It's the only arable field with a footpath that leads to Sproughton and then Ipswich. It's a route taken by the local gyms and running clubs. They can still use it, but they'll be running in an urbanised environment. The people of Bramford drive out of Ipswich and come home to the incredible view of the special landscape area with the Grade 1 listed St Mary's Church and the amazing backdrop of historic woodland. And they're reminded that they live in a rural village and not a suburb. And you can see from the photos there, I don't know which slide it was, but there's some really good photos of that incredible view. Bramford has resisted being swallowed up into Ipswich over the years, and Ipswich has tried to include it, but it remains Mid-Suffolk. A resident told me recently they are very proudly Mid-Suffolk. It's a rural village and must not be incorporated into a town. It's not the identity of the village. Building further towards the boundary of Sproughton is destroying that village identity. Building further towards that boundary as well is the definition of coalescence. This will leave only a small field between the development and the border of Baber, which is an issue because we will no longer have any control over stopping these villages being linked together, and potentially risking in boundary changes losing the economic value of Bramford to another district. So the land is productive, and it's a definite loss with and a loss of opportunities for the future. I don't believe there's a net gain for biodiversity. It damages the village identity. The loss of that field is urbanisation. Natural England say that this application is likely to have significant effect, and I totally agree with them. The visual amenity in the view from the B1313 or Lorraine Way and the footpath will be gone forever, and it sits outside the settlement boundary. Housing supply is another issue I'd like to raise. We've recently had large developments approved that go along the B1313, 195 houses at the CEMEX site, which is not built yet, which adds to 754 approved dwellings